Thank you for joining us on More Than That, a podcast where we dive a little bit deeper into what was preached on Sunday morning. We hope that this is enriching to your walk with Christ and that you love God and people that much more so that we can extend the glory of God to the people He has placed in our lives. So buckle up and enjoy the conversation. Hey church, welcome back to More Than That. This week we had Joe Gill, who brought the sermon this week, and his passage was, let me pull it up, it was John chapter 8, 31 through 59. So, big passage.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's just kind of a trend with John. Maybe it's just like how we've chunked it out. But I just feel like there's just been a whole lot of big passages, and I feel so bad for the person that's reading the scripture every time. But there are things that, when it comes to sermon prep, we end up getting, stuck in the weeds somewhere. It's like, I kind of want to bring this to the church, but it doesn't help my point. And this is your chance. Or if you want to, expand on something that you had to cut off a little bit for time's sake or whatever it might be. You said that you had a few points that you wanted to expand upon.
A couple of them.
What were those points that you wanted to expand on?
So to begin with, I think that in retrospect, I might have spent just a little more time talking about the concept of freedom as belonging. So, so the Jewish hearers of Jesus, they claimed to be free. And Jesus was making the argument that they weren't. And it's important to understand that freedom, the way that they're talking about it there, is more than just the ability to do what you want. And that's kind of intimated by the fact that Jesus talks about freedom, and then he goes into this argument of, the slave does not remain in the house forever, but the son does. How do we connect the dots there? And the way that those dots connect, it has to do with you could take it back to the kind of the ancient Greco-Roman idea of freedom, which was partly a matter of social status. A free citizen, as opposed to a slave, was someone who had all of the rights of citizenship in the city-state. So they had the rights to participate in public debates about policy. They had the rights to make decisions and determinations about their own affairs in ways that slaves didn't have. So in a way, the free man belonged to the polis or the citizenry of the city-state in a way that the slave did not. Now, when you come to a context where Jesus is talking to a bunch of Jews, they may not necessarily be thinking in predominantly Greco-Roman terms, but there was still a similar concept there. So what the example that Jesus uses of the slave not remaining in the house forever, this is something that Paul the Apostle also brings up in Galatians, talking about Sarah and Hagar as an analogy, or oh goodness, what's the word when it's not an analogy? I forget, but
Metaphor?
Oh no, it was something. Never mind. In any case, Paul talks about this too, to where a slave, because he does not belong to the household in the way that a son does, he doesn't have the rights or the expectations of inheritance the way that the son does. And he does not ultimately remain in the household the way that the Son does. And this connects to places where Jesus talks about the wicked being removed at the end of the age, which is also an important theme in the Old Testament, because that's the way that it's pictured in Scripture, in the Old Testament and the New Testament. It's not that Jesus comes and takes away all of the righteous people; he comes and removes the wicked, and then the righteous are the ones who inherit the land because they are the sons of the kingdom. And so freedom as belonging, freedom as rights of inheritance, freedom as an expectation of actually entering into those rights and those benefits. And that's why Jesus makes that reference to a son remaining in the household, but a slave not remaining. The slave gets sent out. And that, I think that's part of why his hearers become so offended, because again, what he's doing, and he's essentially telling them that they are not actually redeemed, which again echoed in Paul, when Paul says they are not Israel that are descended from Israel. Not all of Abraham's descendants or Jacob's descendants are necessarily the true Israel of God, unless there's actually that heart change.
So that kind of brings in this idea of adoption, which
yes, very much
is
so.
a theme that's throughout Scripture, but it's also one of the things that we talk about at City Church a lot. Not just theological adoption, but like actual adoption.
Right.
We have a ton of adoptive parents. So we kind of get this picture of adoption where a slave can become a son by adoption, and then they get to stay in the house.
Right, and that's what it says right at the beginning of the book of John, isn't it? If I were to look that up, because I don't have it memorized.
I would say I would just scroll up, but I lost all of my images with this with my note-taking app. So I don't have it readily available. So I'm gonna shoot to you for that one.
Yeah, let's see. Verse 12 of chapter 1, as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, even to those who believe in his name, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. So you have both there, those concepts of adoption, as well as the idea of that change in nature, the being born of God. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it kind of reminds me too of the concept of grafting. Not, I'm not talking like medical, but
botanical.
Botanical. So let's say you have a tree that's dying, like an apple tree, just because we have a whole lot of orchards in the area, and there's a dying tree, but yet you still want to save that tree. There might be a good branch on that tree still that you can cut off and then graft into that other tree, and they get the full benefits of the root system, the whatever channels that they have for transferring water and nutrients to that tree natively. But then you're grafting in this sapling branch thing that is then becoming part of that tree. It looks different. It looks distinct. It is distinct, but it's also one and the same within the root system. So that was just kind of one of those like other word picture type things that just kind of helps bring the freedom as belonging into a fuller picture. So were there any other points that you wanted to expand on?
Yes. I think that I might also have given just a little more attention to the idea of whether or not we're talking about like a sinless perfection. Because when Jesus says whoever commits sin is the slave of sin, now, does that mean that if you are otherwise perfect but you commit one sin, are you the slave to sin then? And I think that I personally think that the answer there can be yes and no.
Okay.
And when I say that, that's because there is coming the state of glory in which the sin nature, remaining sin, every inclination towards sin will be utterly removed. And that is something that the Christian has to look forward to. And I think of it as, there's coming a time when it's going to be just as natural. It's going to come just as naturally and just as easily to us to do what is right as swimming to a fish. And we're going to do what's right just because our natures will have been so renovated. And they'll be so changed, and all of our desires will be in such alignment with the desires of God that this is another thing that you'll hear me say is that God is going to be able to look at us and say, do as you please, and it's not going to be a problem.
It's gonna be. Sounds pretty good.
How cool is that?
Yeah.
And we're not going to have to second guess our hearts anymore. We're not going to have to wonder. It's like because our natures will have been changed. So in that sense, yes, the fact that someone would even commit a sin, even one sin, even if they were otherwise perfect, in the when you take it to the final extreme or in an absolute sense, yeah, even at that indicates a problem in the nature. But on the flip side of that coin, in our earthly Christian life, God in his wisdom has decided that sanctification is progressive. And this is honestly a question that I am yet sort of wrestling with. Like, okay, why doesn't God just save us and then make us completely and perfectly righteous all at once?
Yeah,
it's like
great.
Why isn't sanctification a once and done thing, just like justification is? But that's not how he's chosen to do it. It's progressive. And so in this life, leading up to the state of glory, when we're going through sanctification, we can't hold to that kind of a standard of perfection. So for us right now, it's a matter of, and I did mention this in the sermon, but it's a matter of progress. Is there any evidence of change? Is there evidence of a change in a person's desires, or because actions are driven by desires, and the desires arise from the nature. And so that's where you're going to see the change, just like Jesus said, by their fruits you will know them. There's an illustration that one of my favorite preachers has used in the past that can also be helpful. Let's say you have a gentleman who he gets up in the morning, he's getting ready for work. His wife wants him to take out the trash. He doesn't have the time. He's irritable. He's grouchy. He yells at his wife. He kicks the dog. He slams the door on the way out and goes to work in a huff. And then he becomes a believer. What changes? Well, now that he's a believer, he wakes up irritable. He yells at his wife. He kicks the dog. He slams the door. He goes to work in a huff. And so what really has changed? What's changed is that prior to becoming a believer, he would do all those things and he would be driving to work feeling completely justified. After he has become a believer, he'll do all those things out of the force of habit. But then on his way to work, the Spirit is going to be driving a knife into his heart.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's one of the first changes, is that when the nature has been changed, you're like, the Holy Spirit is not going to leave you alone anymore, and that the sins that we commit are going to bother us in new ways because of that change in our nature. That it's going to reject those things, kind of like, you know, pigs can eat slop, and that's fine for pigs because pigs have a pig nature.
Mm-hmm.
If you and I tried to eat slop, exactly,
yeah,
you know, our nature can't handle it. It's going to reject forcefully if necessary.
Yeah,
and so that's what you're talking about here. And one of the reasons that a Christian is such a paradoxical person is because, in a way, they have two natures. Because you have the new man, mm-hmm. but you also still have that struggle with the old man. And you still have remaining sin. You know, this is Romans chapter 7. Some people think that Romans 7 only refers to someone before being saved. I think that there are good reasons to believe that Paul is describing the experience of someone even after they're saved, mm-hmm. where he's saying, you know, the good that I want to do, I don't do, and the evil things that I don't want, that is what I do. And mm-hmm, I delight mm-hmm. in the law after the inward man, but I find in my members a law that is contrary, and, you know, who's going to rescue me, wretched man that I am. Mm-hmm. That is part of the Christian experience, until that glorified state is that we have, to use the popular expression or the illustration, we have these two dogs. And the difference there is that, you know, the dog of righteousness, or the white dog, or whatever you want to call that was introduced by the Spirit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and I'm spitballing here, and I can't remember the actual like name for it, which is what I was doing. I was trying to figure it out what it was. But it kind of reminds me of like the ancient debate of it's like you mentioned how it's kind of weird that we kind of have these two natures. We have this mm-hmm. this godly nature, mm-hmm. and then we have this not godly nature kind of coexisting in us. So I can't remember what the actual term is for it, but the ancient debate of one nature or two natures in Christ. Mm-hmm. But that's just kind of like what it reminded me of.
Yeah.
And I can't remember. Christology is not one of my areas of interest in terms of like, there's a book on Christology. Let's read it. That's not where I'm
trying to remember. Like, was it monophysitism?
There's maybe it's mono, or there's mono and di.
There were several different heresies.
They were all kind of like.
If Trevor was here, we could ask Trevor, and he could probably tell us.
He would know.
Trevor would know. But
yeah, so that's kind of what it reminds me of. So
I do know that perhaps the most well-known church council that dealt with this was mm-hmm. the Council of Chalcedon.
Yes,
and that's where you have the Chalcedonian Creed or formulation.
Yep.
Which, you know, hammered those things out. Mm-hmm. And yes, Jesus did possess two natures. Now his human nature was not stained with sin.
Yes.
Jesus did not have a sin nature.
There's a pretty big distinction there between us and Jesus, yeah.
And that's something that's an area where our own minds and our thinking kind of have to be adjusted, because we sort of become so accustomed to the universality of sin that we start to think of sin as being part and parcel to being human. And you see that come up even in media, in TV shows, in movies. There's this idea that something isn't really human if it's not flawed. And I mean, now it depends on how you define flawed. Because if by flawed you simply mean finite, well then yes, because as creatures we have limits. But if it is necessary to be sinful in order to be human, then we have a problem. Because if that's the case, then Adam could not be truly human until he sinned.
Yeah.
And then Jesus was never truly human.
Yeah.
Because he had no sin.
Which, there goes the Athanasian Creed out the window.
There goes the Athanasian Creed. There goes substitutionary atonement. There goes like the entire biblical soteriology, and we're done.
Yep.
Bye. Nobody should be Christians anymore. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I brought that up, because that just brings a whole new something to think about. Like, how does it all work? Like, what are the, obviously there's those distinctions, but how can we keep Jesus in the frame of reference whenever we're looking at those two natures that we possess? Because obviously we are being transformed into his likeness so that we can eventually, like you already brought up, with that sinless perfection in the new heavens and the new earth, like we will be very much like Jesus in that aspect, where we won't have sin anymore.
Yep. We will be human beings as we were designed to be.
Yeah.
Because that's part of what Jesus was. He came as the last Adam, the second Adam. So he came to demonstrate and to carry out everything that Adam was supposed to be and do. And he failed.
Yeah,
Adam failed.
Yeah. So this also kind of brings into one of the other points that, as you were talking during the sermon, my history of philosophy mind just went crazy. Because there's this old guy named Gottfried Leibniz, and he had this whole argument called the what we call now the contingency argument. He called the cosmological argument, but basically it's the whole idea that if something is contingent, then it has a source. Obviously, it has a source, but that means that it can't, like, the universe is a contingent thing. It didn't have to exist, so therefore it has a cause. So that kind of got me thinking, okay, if humans are by nature dependent, which is what you ended up bringing up that in the sermon, I was like, oh, okay, well that's a tie into like a cosmic reality, that it's not just something that applies to us, it applies to the world around us. So we are not we are unique and we are distinct because we are the only image bearers of God.
Correct.
But we are not distinct from the rest of creation in the sense that we're created.
Yes.
Even though we can create, we are not created. Or we are, yes, we are created.
We are created.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Tripping over my words. But what was interesting was the thought that I had after that was that when we commit that cosmic treason, we're not just willy-nilly committing something, some atrocity. We are rejecting that which we're contingent upon.
Yes, we're both rejecting. We're both rejecting our own source, the one who gave us our being, and gives us our every breath. But we're also, in a way, we're trying to stake a claim on ultimacy. We're trying to claim that we're not contingent. And we see humans doing this in a number of ways. Perhaps one of the most in your face, or one of the most prevalent at the moment, is we make like it's not an overt claim. We don't just come out and say it, but we kind of make claims to omniscience.
Kind of.
And people treat the internet that way. Like
Yeah.
people almost start to treat the internet as if, you know, if it's not on the internet anywhere, then it just doesn't exist and never did. In spite of the fact that, like, strictly speaking, we don't even know the names of the vast majority of people that have lived on this planet. Like,
does that mean they never lived?
Right. But, you know, millions and billions upon billions of people have been born and lived and died on this planet, and, you know, nobody but God remembers their names anymore or what they did or didn't do.
Yeah. Well, and it almost, like, essentially we brought in the cosmic stuff. It's like, how many stars are out there that we just don't know exist?
Sure.
Or that they have gone out of existence before we even were able to experience them.
Yeah.
And in our modern scientific way, we're actually trying to name them all.
Oh, goodness.
Which, I mean, I know that's an enterprise.
And we have all these really boring, like, numeric names using lots of people's last names.
Yeah.
Or even things like, you know, we sort of absolutize science. And again, this is a place where humans start to kind of claim omniscience, that if we don't observe it, then it doesn't exist. But, you know, we can't even really be sure that we know all of the different critters that have lived on the planet, because, you know, we can look at the fossil record, but fossils are actually rather rare. There have to be very specific circumstances and situations in place, very specific conditions that have to be in place in order for a fossil to be made, because the vast majority of things that die, they're decomposed.
Yeah.
You know, they get eaten by bugs and carrion feeders and bacteria. And so, you know, it's very possible, and I would even say it's very likely that there have been lots of different kinds of creatures that we don't know they existed because they never left any fossils.
Yeah. And I mean, that's one of the things that I like about science. And properly speaking, science, where we can actually say, like, yeah, these are the ones that we know, but
we don't know what we don't know.
It's like an open book. Like, there's still pages that we can insert into the known creature book, so that we can just insert a page, give a little fact sheet, and then we find another one. Oh, okay. Open that 3-ring binder, stick another page in there, and it just keeps going and going and going. But then at the same time, kind of like what Paul said in Acts 17, when the Athenians had the altar to the unknown God, I can almost imagine like an extra page, however many pages, as like to the unknown creatures, to where we don't know, but they probably are out there.
We don't know how many pages that would be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, were there any
Slight
other
rabbit trail there?
Yeah, that's all right. That's what this is for. So, were there any other points that you wanted to expand on? Because I do have some other things, but I also don't want to take away from something that you wanted to.
No, I think
dive in more.
The last additional thing that I would say would be it's kind of a point of application. The Jews had this idea, and I used that phrase, the Jews, and I used it in my sermon just because that's the phrase in the text.
Yeah.
Like John called them the Jews. So the Jews had this idea that because they possessed the law, they were not slaves of sin. See, they had a concept of slavery to sin. They did. But you see it here, and you also see it in other places in the Scripture, like Romans, where they had this notion that they were not slaves to sin because they had the light of the law, as opposed to the pagan nations that did not have the benefit of that revelation. But Jesus again, just like Paul does, or rather Paul just like Jesus, but both of them, they push back on that idea that just because you have the law, and James gets into this too, just because you have the law doesn't mean that it has rendered you free. And people today, or professing Christians today, can do similar things. The truth of the matter is that just because we go to church and listen to sermons, or just because we listen to worship music, or just because we're pro-life, these are, to use the philosophical term, these are accidents, as opposed to essences of what makes a Christian. And, just like for the ancient Jews, just because they had the law didn't mean that they were in with God. We can have the trappings of Christianity, and we can have the Bible, and you can even have people who read their Bibles, but if there's not the change of nature, if the Holy Spirit hasn't actually raised them back to life again spiritually and made that change, then it's, the church attendance, the Bible reading, the listening to sermons, that's nothing.
Yeah. So, I have a term for it. I call it moral therapeutic deism.
Yep.
At that point, you're just in church because you like the music.
It makes you feel good about yourself.
It makes you feel good about yourself. It has some pretty applicable moral teachings, and you probably like the people.
Yeah.
And I know people like that.
Yeah.
That they're not Christians, but they love church.
And honestly, if you asked me what I would rather, for an unsaved person, where would I rather that they be?
Oh,
on a Sunday morning, come to church.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Come and listen to the sermons. I'm not saying that it's not going to do you any good in that sort of moralistic way.
Yeah.
And if it influences you to be a better person, okay, I'll take that. But that's not going to save your soul from hell.
Yeah. We'll say yes. We'll withhold the amen.
It will help the wider community be a little cleaner.
Yeah.
Shoot, it was it Richard Dawkins who was sort of bemoaning the loss of religion and cultural Christianity because he appreciated the results.
Yeah. Yeah.
The problem is this was inevitable, because when you divorce those outward results from the soil that is the gospel and regeneration and true salvation, then all of those other things that Richard Dawkins likes, they're cut flowers.
Yeah, and I think, and I don't know her story in and out, but Hersey Ali, who was one of Dawkins' right-hand people, is now a Christian. And I'm curious if that's what she, again, without knowing the inner workings of her story, if that's what she noticed. She's like, all of this that I'm seeing here from Dawkins, and what he's claiming about Christianity, especially as a new atheist who wanted to rid the world of religion at one point, now him coming back and saying, oh no, I'm a cultural Christian, I like the things that Christianity has brought. I think it's bunk, but it has brought some good, and I'm curious if she saw the disconnect, and whenever she did connect those dots, she was like, I get it.
Maybe,
all right, Jesus, here I am. But that's cultural Christianity. I would much rather a person be a cultural Christian than have no seeming want to relate with it.
Right.
There's a whole bunch of people out there, and I'm very sympathetic to. I see their point, and I agree with their point. But the whole idea, especially in the West, that we wouldn't be where we are today in the West without Christianity.
Oh, absolutely.
We wouldn't have the universities. We wouldn't have science. We wouldn't have
the hospitals, the orphanages. You
name it, Christians probably invented it.
For a lot of things. Yep.
Yeah. So, I'm not saying that that's a good argument point. It's a good point for an argument, but it's not a really good argument to say, hey, you should believe Christianity because of this.
It's a start to an argument.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a slam dunk, but you can trace those things back and say, all of these things organically grew out of a Christian worldview. Mm-hmm. What do you actually get organically from an anti-Christian or an atheistic worldview? Mm-hmm. The argument there that I would make would be things like, Stalin and Mao Zedong, and some of the atrocities that they perpetrated.
Yeah.
And again, it's not that atheists can't be decent people,
and that they can't produce good things.
right? But the atheist worldview philosophically cannot provide a foundation for things like human dignity. Can't provide a foundation for things like objective right and wrong.
Yeah.
It's just like they can adopt those standards and they can live by those standards, but that's all borrowed capital from Christianity.
Yeah.
Or theism at the very least. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's and one of the things, since you brought up people who have committed moral atrocities, you kind of brought up one of the things that I had to read in school. It's a book called No Ordinary Men, and it's the idea in the book, at least, that any one of the men that were actually part of Hitler's army could have been Hitler himself.
Yeah.
That there is no real difference between Hitler and the Nazi soldier in the trenches on D-Day. There's no real ontological difference, with the exception of degree.
Sure.
And maybe status and power and things like that, and the things that they've attained that they use to get to this point. But either way, that soldier in the trenches and the Fuhrer, there's not real much of a difference.
Right. Yeah. No, I think there's truth to that, and I think that that goes right back to the concept of the corruption of man's nature. I think it's very dangerous for anyone, especially for a Christian, to look at somebody who does terrible things and say or think, I would never do that. Given the proper circumstances, you could. Yeah, you could. It's the saying, there, but for the grace of God go I. And that's true. Because it is the grace of God that people aren't as bad as they could possibly be. I do believe that one of the things that God does by his power in this world is he does put restraints on human evil, so that we don't go to the fullest lengths and fullest extents of all of our sinful urges. But yeah, that, like, all of those defiling things that proceed from the sinful heart, it's all there for just about any individual.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's why, because you look at the headlines in our town, and there's some things that have happened in my hometown, which just so happens to be your wife's hometown. There's some things that are kind of upheaving the town in terms of convictions and things like that. And while it saddens me, I think that's one of the things that I liked about No Ordinary Men, is it didn't desensitize me, but it doesn't. Whenever things like that happen, it doesn't surprise me. It grieves me, but it doesn't surprise me.
Right.
Because now I realize, he just took it. He took these things and perverted them, or she did the same, took those things and perverted them, did all of these things that now there's conviction, there's law, there's legal action that's being taken. Right. And now doesn't surprise me, but man, it hurts.
I think you could put it in a very useful and helpful way by talking about nurture or cultivation. That the difference between Hitler and one of the soldiers in the trenches there wasn't a difference in the seeds of corruption that were in each heart. But Hitler, throughout his life, was into situations where those corrupt seeds were nurtured and cultivated in a particular way, to ultimately bring about the man that he became. I'm trying to be careful in the way that I say this, because I don't want to stray into the idea, which I think is a very wrong-headed idea, that people either are made evil or they can be made good by controlling their circumstances. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the reason that the evil, the native evil in Hitler's heart became such a monstrosity that it did become, it was the same native evil that was in the soldier's heart. But by God's providence, the circumstances that Hitler went through, cultivated and nurtured that evil into something different between the two men. But the corruption is the same.
Yeah, and it's almost as if Hitler or Stalin, name your person. Basically, the circumstances that they were in acted as a grow light for
yes
that seed.
Because you can't go to the other extreme, which is just as ridiculous, and say that the circumstances that a person lives in have no bearing whatsoever. Of course they do.
Yeah.
It's just that the evil of the human nature is inherent ever since the fall.
Yeah.
It's not intrinsically human, that corruption. It's a corruption. As a matter of fact, it would be more accurate to say that ever since the fall, we are less than fully human, because we're not everything that we were created and designed to be. But circumstances do have significance. They do have importance in the ways that they do shape us in a way. They just don't make us either good or evil, which is kind of the more progressive idea of human nature, which tends to assume that people are basically good, but that if you can control circumstances and environment, then you can produce a better society, which has been proven
they've tried
false over and over.
Yeah,
but we still pound that drum because the alternative is inadmissible. So.
Yeah. So before we close out, is there anything else that you would like to bring up?
No, I think I've pretty much tapped out my thoughts.
Okay. Yeah. It was just kind of, I guess the last thing that I wanted to get your thoughts on has to do with that story about your coworker. Essentially, he was asking about the problem of evil, and that's a really big issue for a lot of people.
Yeah.
We're kind of looking at it from a 30,000 foot view. I don't want to get into the details of the story or individual details about the problem of evil or the different types of the problem of evil. And I was thinking about this today. How would you know when to be pastoral with something like the problem of evil, or when to be intellectual about the problem of evil? Because that's where I see the tension lying. Because whenever we're talking with someone, we got to do this on the fly. We got to read that person and figure out which one's which. So right. taking your coworker, for instance, how did you figure out whether to go the pastoral route or the intellectual route? If you can quantify it.
Well, help me better understand the question. How could we illustrate the difference between pastoral and intellectual?
So I guess when I'm thinking about the pastoral versus intellectual aspect of the problem of evil is that there's the intellectual side is, okay, we're just kind of dealing with the facts of evil exists. So how can a good God let evil actually happen? It's just kind of the fact of the matter. But then the pastoral side is more that experiential. You're actually experiencing that evil, and then it now becomes an emotional problem for them to wrestle with. So now instead of, yes, you might be kind of addressing some of the intellect, but you're kind of addressing the intellect to get to the heart. So going from the mind to the heart rather than just stopping at the mind. So if any practical...
in many cases, that emotional struggle has a lot to do, or it has strong connections to some kind of an intellectual impasse. Like somebody's having trouble reconciling something intellectually. But at the same time, that's creating some emotional turmoil on top of just whatever pain they might be going through. And perhaps that might be what's kind of at the bottom of that question. You think, is when someone asks that question, what they're really asking is, why do I hurt?
I mean, I think so. I personally really think that the problem of evil is just emotion that makes its way out to intellect. Just because evil is something that we all experience.
Right.
And to be, at least in a post-fall world, to be traumatized is to be human.
Right. And probably in most cases, why does anybody even really care about the intellectual problem until it comes home and makes a mess in their own backyard?
Yeah. So I guess maybe how can you decide which one to take? Which one would, I guess, in your coworker's circumstance, which one did you take first? Did you take a pastoral route or an intellectual route?
I think it was more of a dance.
Okay.
Because I mean, it was, I had one fairly protracted conversation with him on a drive back from Wilkes-Barre the one day. And I don't even know if he's read my note yet. I mean, at some point I can ask him. Or I think, actually I did ask him once, and he admitted that he hadn't gotten around to reading it at the time. So I don't know if he's read it since. So I don't know what his response to that argument was. But when I was talking to him, it was a mix.
Okay.
Because it was a fairly emotionally charged conversation.
Yeah.
Even though he was very, very amiable about it. Like he was open to having the conversation. Nobody got nasty. Nobody got belligerent. He wasn't putting his finger in my face. I wasn't beating him over the head with a Bible. It was great. But at the same time, there were very strong intellectual elements to the conversation. And I think that I don't really see how a conversation about that could be very different. It's like you almost have to be able to sort of switch tracks according to where the conversation goes. And I think you're probably going to move back and forth as the conversation progresses. Okay. Just because of how deeply intertwined both of those things are. And so you're going to have to answer intellectual questions intellectually, but still maintaining your humanity, so to speak, and sort of maintaining a concern for the pastoral realities as well. Because I think unless you're in a completely different kind of conversation, like for instance, a public moderated debate, that's when things are going to they should be much more heavily weighted on the intellectual side, and hopefully both sides are practicing good intellectual honesty. But for such an emotionally charged topic, that that might be less likely to happen than for some other topics. But yeah, I think you do kind of have to almost continually be reading the person and just being ready to give a response with with gentleness,
Mm-hmm.
like it says in 1 Peter.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, you do need to be prepared to meet the intellectual challenge. And as I understand the goal of apologetics, you're taking away the false structures that people have built in order to hide the light. And this is the way that I look at it, because I believe that the Bible teaches that every human being has an innate awareness of the existence of God, of the power and the divinity of God, and that's something that God planted there.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's part of that. That's built in by God in every human soul. Is that knowledge, and I consider it an article of true knowledge. It's the closest thing that human beings can have to true knowledge, is this awareness, and it's sort of like this ball of light in everybody's soul. And for those who are unbelievers, that light, it rings in their ears, and it stings their eyes, and it burns their skin, and they want to hide it. So they will build up these philosophical structures to sort of entomb that light.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a powerful light, and it's always straining against their constructions and threatening to bring it crumbling down. But the role and the goal of the apologist is to be able to, in a pastoral way, you need to come and take down all of those false philosophical structures. Mm-hmm. And what you're doing is you're basically you're bringing that person to the crisis point and saying, you got to deal with this.
Yeah.
It's like, you have to face up to this at some point and make your decision. You can't just leave it in a shabby tomb forever.
Mm-hmm. It's going to bust out at some point.
It's going to bust out, which is part of why it seems so many atheists are so frustrated and angry, I think, is because they're always having to shore up the breaches.
It's exhausting.
Yes, it is. They're tired.
Yeah.
And frustrated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would even say that from a non-Christian perspective, that's kind of where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're just constantly throwing these things up. You're trying to throw supports in whatever way, shape, or form that you can, adding layer by layer so that it's harder to get to. Mm-hmm. And that's exhausting, because now you're taking valuable resources, mental and emotional resources and spiritual resources, to do that when you could just let it out. And this is where I think Jesus being rest, or finding our rest in Jesus, really comes at its greatest benefit. Is whenever we let it go. Now we're not expending that energy to brace these walls. Mm-hmm. Now we can rest from that bracing and experience the light.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a good way to kind of talk about apologetics, is helping people break or stop building those structures up, or starting to help them tear them down and dismantle them, but also keeping the bits and pieces of it that can be used and utilized for good. Because like we said earlier, atheists can produce good things, or non-Christians can produce good things. Sure. And those good things also include ideas and philosophical structures that can be really helpful for defending and proclaiming the Christian worldview. Yeah.
Well, then, every error, every successful error has elements of truth to it, and often more than just a little bit. And yes, so you do. If you're going to make a compelling argument, you have to be able to take what there is in their thinking that is actually true and accurate, and you have to be able to marshal that into the support of your own case.
And that's where...
Because if you just go around and saying, well, you're just 100% wrong, they're going to say things that aren't 100% wrong, and then you then you just discredit yourself.
Yeah. And you look like a fool.
You do.
But that's where you brought up First Peter. That's where that being prepared, being ready, comes into play. Because if you're not ready by doing the homework beforehand and just taking a general interest, maybe not necessarily in that person's specific argument, but in the general arguments for Christianity, then you're going to be able to be like, oh, I remember that. I'm going to pull that mental note out of my file cabinet in my head somewhere, and now I have this brief that I can kind of pull from.
I think that going back to your question, when it comes to dealing with someone and whether to go for intellect or pastoral, I think that you have to, you're going to be using intellect in order to help them and in order to make your own arguments. It has to begin pastorally. And what I mean by that is you have to start by listening.
Oh, yeah.
It's like if you hear something that sounds like a classic unbelieving objection, and you just, pull from your mental filing cabinet the appropriate response and just spit that out of them without actually listening to who they are as a person and understanding their story. Because they might be making some of the same objections, but they're coming at that from a unique personal background. And if you're not willing to see them as a person, and if you can't communicate to them that you actually care about them as a person, instead of just an objector to be answered, that's where the pastoral element really comes in. Is you have to start by proving to this person that you actually see them and care about them as a person in their own right. Before you almost kind of have to earn the right to start using some of those intellectual arguments again by proving first that you actually care about them. And you're going to do that by listening to them first, asking them questions about their thinking, asking them questions about their personal story and what's brought them to this point, why they're asking these questions, and why they're experiencing these hurts. And then once you've kind of established that bit of relationship, then you can start to have a more intellectual exchange, because, just going into intellectual back and forth, that by its very nature, it puts a little bit of strain on a relationship, because in a way it's like having an argument. And so you kind of have to build up some relational capital, because the relationship, even if it's somebody you just met, the relationship has to be able to bear the strain of that contention. And so if the person doesn't believe that you actually care about them and who they are and where they've come from, they're not going to hear any of the intellectual things that you have to say, no matter how cogent they may be.
Yes.
So I think that's probably the best answer I could give.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that is, I think, one of my favorite ways to talk to people. Because I'm not even talking. I'm not expending any effort verbally.
Right.
All I'm doing is
tell
listen.
Me about you.
Yeah, tell me about you. Tell me how you came to here, or came to this point, and
tell me
then
this, how often do those people, they get to talking and then they wind up answering their own question?
Yeah, because I mean, you might be asking some other clarifying questions, so you're on the same page, trying to get on the same page as them.
Right.
But also you're trying to, and I'm giving some things away from the class that I'm going to teach in the fall. But
spoiler
alert for CCI, tactics is coming, which your daughter went through, and she did really well.
Oh, good.
She loved it. But the asking those pointed questions for your own clarity, but for them to also get clear about where they are.
Yeah.
But then as you're doing that, because you're investing in them, they feel loved.
Yeah.
They feel
Well, it is
seen,
love.
heard. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Telling the people the truth, helping them to get to the truth, is love. But again, you have to be. You're not approaching it as this is a person to defeat.
Yeah.
This is you're trying to help them think something through.
Yeah, you're seeing them as an image bearer, not as an object.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really the hinge point, is if you see them as the object, you're going to treat them like an object, you're going to give the intellectual answer and then move on. But if you see them as an image bearer, now you see them as, okay, we are on the same level, now let's walk.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're leading the way because I'm asking you the questions and you're telling your story. But I might start to veer off into a different direction of your story to get clearer, and that is hopefully we can get closer and closer to the cross as we take those little side trails.
Yeah, and have a realistic definition of success as well.
Yeah,
because I mean, if you go into this thinking that the only outcome that you will accept is that this person is converted and they're confessing creation the way that you believe it, and soteriology the way that and you're demanding all the things, you're not likely to get there very often, and you're actually more likely to drive people away.
Yeah.
However, if you can accept success as, even if you've kind of disturbed them a little bit, you've given them something to consider, as you like to say, you've put a pebble in their shoe, and they're going to go away, and they're going to go home that night still thinking about that question you asked or that thing you said that just doesn't quite fit in their framework of how they view the world. That is something that God can use. We need to be willing to be either Paul or Apollos, and to give God the glory for the final outcome. Paul planted, Apollos watered, but God brought about the growth.
Yeah.
And so we have to, that's another aspect. You have to have the faith to trust God to do his work in a person's life. It's not all on you. It's not all up to you to, carry them all the way across that finish line. It is up to us to be faithful in the places and in the situations where God calls us and puts us. And it's up to us just to be sure that we are presenting the gospel faithfully. So, in an apologetics context or an evangelistic context, which they're often one and the same, one of our concerns is, okay, whether or not you accept the gospel and believe the gospel, do you clearly understand the gospel? Which is one of the biggest issues right now, because there's so much there's so much misunderstanding and muddled thinking about what the gospel actually is, especially in our day and age when biblical literacy has declined to
all-time low.
Literacy in general has declined to abysmal levels, and biblical literacy much more so. A lot of the problem for people is they don't actually know what the gospel is. A lot of Christians don't know actually what the gospel is, which is sad in itself. But when it comes to witnessing to someone or engaging in apologetics, that's one of your main concerns. Beyond just, okay, who is this person? Where do they come from? What is their story? What is the shape of their thinking? Do they actually clearly understand the gospel? Because they cannot actually reject or accept the gospel until they have a clear understanding of what it is. Yeah. They have to know what they are assenting to before they can actually do that meaningfully.
Yeah, yeah. And it's, so for a baseball reference, we don't have to step up to the plate as Big Papi. Yep. We don't have to try to hit the home run every time.
No.
Because if you swing for the fence, 99 times out of 100, you're going to strike out. And be okay with just getting to first base.
Yeah.
Just making connection with the ball. Just do your best for the little wins, because the little wins are going to start to add up. You're going to start to break things down. So we could go on.
We could. Obviously. But I have family at home. You have family at home.
Yep.
And we need to wrap this up.
Yeah. So thank you, Joe, for taking the time after work.
Certainly.
To come in and just sit down and talk about these things, talk about things that you wanted to expand on and press a little bit harder for the church, and for helping us get clear on some of these things that we talked about, like sinless perfection and things like that, and what that actually means. But this is not the sermon, obviously.
No.
So if you are very well confused, go back and listen to the sermon. If you are listening on the podcast, just go one podcast earlier in the City Church channel, and you're going to find it. And if you are watching on YouTube, it is going to be in the Here's Your King playlist, so go find it there. And this is just a supplement to that sermon. It's going to hopefully help make things a little bit more sense. Hopefully also getting you to start asking some questions so that you can probe a little bit deeper, not only into God's word, but into God's world. So Joe, thank you again for all of the work that you did.
Absolutely.
Not just here, but in preparation and all the things that you do for our church. So with that, we will see you all next week. God bless.
Good night, everybody.